Hello, all my new CXL friends. Some of you I've met, some of you I hope to meet by Friday. So customer experience is the customer's perception of their interaction with your business. So think about that, the customer's perception of their interaction. Your business is kind of tertiary in that equation. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey, Vanguard's journey, into trying to get our heads around what that means and to act more from the customer's perspective. So I don't know everything about customer experience, right? I'm going to tell you what I do know. You take what works for you and leave the rest. And I'll make it easy for you. Here are my 3 themes. So the first one is do the work to find the overlap. Figure out where your customer needs and your business needs overlap. It's there. And if you can do that, that little space in the middle, that's your toehold. That's what's going to get you budget and resources and attention from the finance guys so that you can improve that customer experience. The second piece is not just listen to your customers, but let them actually do the talking on your behalf. There are things that they can say that you can't or maybe don't want to say, and it's much more effective when it comes out of a customer's mouth. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the third piece, the third thing that I've learned kind of the hard way, is to go past the digital metrics. So I'm kind of a digital analytics person in my background, but what we've found is if we don't dig deeper into the customer's experience, we don't find those real pain points, those things that are kind of hanging up the customers. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context about Vanguard so that you kind of understand where I'm coming from. So 40 years ago, you couldn't just go buy a stock. You couldn't get an E-Trade account and go buy an odd lot of penny stocks. You couldn't buy any stocks. You had to call a stockbroker, and you had to pay a fee. And you couldn't put money into funds. I mean, you had to have $10,000, you had to have $100,000 to buy into some of the big funds. So this guy here, Mr. Jack Bogle, God rest his soul, he passed away in January. I get a little verklempt about it. He was a great guy. He disrupted the whole industry. He actually got fired from a fund and built out a client-owned company that we actually were built this way now. So all the profits go to the bottom line so that you as customers, and many of you are customers, have a lower expense ratio so that you can actually build wealth using the capital markets. So this is our mission, to take a stand for all investors, to treat them fairly, e.g. don't gouge them with fees, and to give them the best chance for investment success so that regular people like you and me, I'm assuming you're not all millionaires, can actually invest and retire, put your kids through college, buy houses, that sort of thing. So what does Vanguard look like today? We've got 7 million retail customers. We call them retail. It's actually individual investors like you and I. We've got about 4 million 401k investors. Many of you here may have your 401k at Vanguard. We also we have some B2B businesses as well. Most of the stories I'm going to tell you come from our retail business. We also work with financial advisors. So I talked to the folks in the financial advisor services group and said, how many financial advisors do we actually work with? I think we've got some more work to do there because they kept sending me back assets under management, and I kept saying, count people, not dollars. Like, count people. We also have some international locations, and you can actually Google this. There's a thing called the Vanguard effect. So when Vanguard moves into the UK or Australia or other markets, actually the cost of investing actually goes down. It's a well-documented effect. The competition actually starts to say, okay, we can't charge as much, Vanguard's coming in, and the cost per investors drops. So against this backdrop, about 3 years ago, our corporate strategy group put together a project. They said, look, Vanguard's differentiated itself over the past 45 years as the low-cost leader. Many of our competitors have gotten in on the act. Again, the Vanguard effect. You know, the cost of investing has actually gone down. And it's not such big news when something is free. So what are we going to do about that? How are we going to differentiate Vanguard over the next 45 years? And they actually came up with customer experience. We've got to make it easy to invest, to manage your money. We also found that we had a ways to go, and part of that was our own success. So this is a crazy slide. If you look at it, when I started at Vanguard in 2012, we crossed the line into $1 trillion assets under management. It was such a big deal. We all got little crystal paperweights. There were clocks. It's really pretty. And then we got to $2 trillion. And I think we got lunch. By 5 trillion, by 5 trillion, it wasn't even an email. It was just like, hey, 5 trillion. So good news, we've got tons of assets under management, but that starts to cause some operational strain. So it takes longer to get your phone call answered as a client. It takes longer to get your paperwork processed as a client. That's not a great customer experience. So frankly, we're not even talking about like crazy innovation or disruption. We're talking about being able to answer the phone. So that actually gave us a lot of air cover. We were in marketing at the time. We were in a separate client experience group. We wanted to do some experimentation. And we thought, this is our secure homepage, may look familiar to some longtime customers. This is where you get to when you log in. And we know from talking to customers that a lot of customers like to log in, and we call it pet their money, like just check their balance, make sure it's still there. So it's a really important page, but there's lots of other things you can do there. Manage your money, check your taxes, that sort of thing. So we thought, great place to experiment. How do we start to customize and personalize that experience? Because customers are very different. They're at different stages in their life. They're different kinds of customers. They have multiple accounts. They have one. So we went to our IT group and said, it's a great idea. We want to experiment. And they said, sure, you can do anything you want. We said, really, anything? And they said, absolutely, as long as it's in the header or the footer. And like actually not the whole header, just that part over there, like just that little spot, you can change that. We said, look, you guys, like that's not gonna work. What are we gonna do here? So this is a perfect example of my first point of finding that overlap between customer needs and business needs. We actually know from market research, and this is no big light bulb, that when our customers go online, it means they actually don't want to call us. That's why they went online. If they wanted to call us, they would have called us first, right? Not a light bulb. We also know from a business perspective, if you call Vanguard right now, we're open, you will get a fully licensed rep, Series 7 and 63, sitting in the Shishi suburb of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. You don't have to do a lot of math to realize how expensive that phone call is, right? So we went to the business and said, hey, we get a lot of visits to this page, 100 million a year, that's big for us. 2 million phone calls we can attribute to this page. Let's do something about it. So we went to the officer who manages the IT infrastructure, and luckily he got it on the first try. And he pulled together his architects and a number of folks to rebuild this page. So it had like 70-something connections back to our mainframe. I mean, it pulled every piece of data on you that we know. The web servers were literally like tied to the mainframe. It was ridiculous. So they spent a whole week, figured out how to do it, took them 6 more months, and they basically kind of divorced that page from the mainframe so that we could do lots of different experiments on the page and customize it. So that was a Herculean task, but it was huge for us because we could start to run some really fun experiments. So I'll share with you actually one of the first experiments that we ran. So tax season is really big for us. For many of you, the holidays are big. For us, it's tax season, kind of starts in December and goes on. We get tons of phone calls. And we play this funny joke on our clients. It's hilarious. So we'd say to you, look, sign up for e-delivery so that we don't have to send you mail, send you paper forms, your tax forms. And then we hide the link, like really far down, so you can't find it. So we know we get tens of thousands of phone calls during tax season. Where's my tax form? So we decided to run one of our first experiments, said, get ready for tax time. Here's your links. This is great. And we ran the challenger versus the champion that did not have the tax form links on it. And we found that the call rate was way lower. It was like 12% lower, something like that. And we thought we were geniuses. I mean, we told it to everybody we could find. This is the greatest thing. We've decreased call rate. How awesome is that? We've hit a major metric. And that was terrific, but then what we heard was, hey, it's still tax season, like run it again. And I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to run a test twice. I think General Patton said that, right? Never pay for that. Anyway, so we ran it again, and the difference was not nearly as much. And we thought, oh my God, like check the spreadsheet. That can't be right. It worked so well the first time. What happened the second time? Couldn't figure it out. And we ended up talking to our frontline reps and our team leaders to say, what do you think's going on there? And they said, oh, we can tell you. In December and January, clients call in and ask, when are my tax forms coming out? Then in February, they call back to say, where the heck are my tax forms? And by March, they've already got their stuff. They're calling them with super complicated questions. So you missed the boat on that one. So we knew for the next year, like when to actually put that in place. So kind of a funny story, but we learned a lot there. So after we did a bunch more experiments, we started to get some good exposure, and we actually got quite a bit of funding, which I realize is not usually what happens, but we did, and senior management said, hey, scale up the program quite a bit more. So we thought, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna scale our organization? That was all we were thinking about. And we brought in McKinsey to help us do that, and they actually helped us understand more of the customer perspective and journeys, and really get our heads out of our collective org charts to figure out, that was supposed to be funny, to really understand what the customers were trying to do. So the first thing we did was put together a journey taxonomy, and that's just a fancy way of saying, what do customers think they want to do with us? And this is not rocket science. I realize it's an eye chart, but it's basically, attract, shop, how are clients kind of considering us if they decide to work with us? Then there's our onboarding journeys, moving money with us, then there's manage, sub-journeys, trading, there's plan, coming up with your goals, deciding what you want to do. Then there's kind of some managed stuff, changing your address, that sort of thing. So not really rocket science, but what we did to get to this was to mine our existing primary research to really understand how customers were talking to us about their experience. And then we also did a lot of ethnographic research, actually. We sent out our market research folks and some of our journey owners to people's homes to kind of understand how they think about interacting with Vanguard. Are they relaxed? Are they sitting at their kitchen table? Are they kind of hunched over the counter like they're dealing with the IRS? Like, how are they thinking about their interactions with us? And this is what we came up with. Not super hard to do. The hard part, I will share with you, is starting to put some volumes around this. So how many people are in these journeys? Are they able to complete? And I'll share with you, your management reports are probably the same as ours. None of them align with any of these customer journeys. They're all about P&L and business units and that sort of thing. So actually quantifying, putting some numbers around this was a little bit tough. We actually had to dig into some operational systems. I almost call it dark data. It was stuff that people weren't actually even looking at. So we had to dig into, to really understand money movement and different kinds of transactions. We had to really dig into the details. And you might say, geez, don't you track that? I mean, you're a money company. So the general ledger tracks what comes in and what goes out. What it doesn't track is how many times it took the client to try it, to attempt it, to actually get through, how many, what they were actually trying to do. Were they in the right transaction funnel? We make it a little bit complicated there. So it's those sorts of things, how the client was feeling when they actually tried to do this transaction. It's those kind of details you need to get to understand the pain points and to really fix what's going on in that space. So what we really needed to get to was some decisions around, like, where are we going to put our resources on this whole taxonomy? And to get to a faster decision, I would say, think about using the qualitative data. And I'm saying that as the analytics director, but it's all about making the decision. And if you can listen to your clients and understand where those pain points are, use some gut decisions that you've got from the business. I mean, the business knows where the pain points are too. Talk to the frontline folks, kind of triangulate so that you can get somewhere faster. You can really start to have an impact on the customer journey. That's what we did for one of our first journeys. We just didn't have all the numbers to go along with these. So let me stop there for just a minute. I realize not everybody has the luxury of McKinsey coming in and kind of reorganizing everybody. And frankly, that's actually where we're at. McKinsey's out of here, and we are championing this framework to the rest of the business. So you can get some really good competitive intel from your industry or outside your industry. There are some companies that are really good at client experience. So USAA is one of them that we follow in financial services. Cigna is another. There are a number of companies out there. Forrester has some really great research. They do a lot on customer experience. They have a huge customer index survey. They're a little bit expensive if you don't have access to them. They've also actually got a free podcast, particularly around customer experience. So that's a really good resource. Actually polled our UX strategists to come up with some CX blogs that were their favorite. They're at the end of this presentation. And you've got some internal data too. So you've got lots of quantitative digital analytics data. You've got probably lots of qualitative data, some surveys that you've got. So you can take a look at that to start to tell the story to get support. And the second quote I totally stole from Michael Agard. Talk to the people who talk to the people. These are your frontline reps, right? I was telling you how our frontline reps helped us understand the tax season question. You may have them as well. Talk to them. They know what's going on. They have a pretty good idea of the trends out there. And also talk to your financial folks. Like, they will really know what kind of key performance indicators are going to get management attention. And again, if you can help use that information to find that sweet spot, you're going to get a lot more exposure and then hopefully budget. So what we did next, after we put together that whole taxonomy, and we've done similar ones for our B2B lines of business as well, although we have not yet stood up as many journey labs, is we put together what, again, this is a McKinsey term, but we put together the journey labs to go after these particular journeys. And this is really a change for Vanguard. So kind of in old Vanguard speak, when the principal came in and said, I want that button to be blue, you said, what shade? And you changed it. So this is completely different. We are kind of charging the journey owner with leading the team to understand what the problem is, and then quantifying what we think the opportunity is, and then actually fixing it. And you'll see they've got the resources to do it. So we've got a business sponsor directly aligned with each journey lab, and they're really kind of the champion, but they're not guiding, they're just setting the general direction. So money movement is tough. Figure out why. The journey owner's got a data analyst, they've got some creative folks, UX strategist, designer, writer. They've also got a scrum master, a tech lead, and several developers so that they can go in, diagnose the problem, and come up with ways to test and learn towards an approach, and then actually fix it when they decide they want to scale. So super different approach for us, but it's working really well. And I will add that these pods sit together, so we're co-located. We haven't really figured out the virtual thing, but we used to be in separate buildings, so you'd have marketing in one building, and you have technology in another, and if you had a question, you had to schedule a meeting, nobody's available till next Thursday. The cycle times were really long, and literally having everybody in the same area of the floor sitting next to each other has increased our cycle times unbelievably. So that's been a huge breakthrough for us. And they're tasked with making things better, and when I say better, I mean, conversion is a huge metric across all of the journey labs, but for us it really means, can the customer actually do what they were trying to do? Which is, again, a little bit different than how we think about conversion. So here's another funny metric story that I want to tell you that kind of illustrates my point about going deeper than just digital metrics. So our first journey lab is around money movement. And one of those, one flavor of money movement at Vanguard is transferring assets. So say you've got a 401k with Schwab, and you've changed jobs, and now at your new employer, it's Vanguard, so you want to move all that money into Vanguard. Should be easy, you go online, you fill everything out. So we thought that, we're going to redesign this whole process. It's going to be great. The designers got super excited. We got new pictures of puppies and people running and like action. And we started to look at the digital analytics and realized that actually the conversion rate, the online submission rate for this process was really high. It was like north of 70%. So why were the customers really unhappy about this? Couldn't figure it out. We were talking to the manual processors. We've got this whole huge mailroom. And they were really unhappy. There's lots of paperwork involved with this process. We hate it. And we thought, paperwork, geez, because we've got this straight through processing metric, and it looks like most of these submissions go straight through. We couldn't figure it out. And then we realized we had to literally get a couple of processing managers in a room and interrogate them. So what's going on here? We found out they had a secret metric. So this secret metric of no touch straight through processing. And that meant nobody actually touched it. But that was only about 30% of all the online submissions that we saw. The other 70% actually kicked out to paper. They literally printed out, and between 1 and 7 people had to go and deal with this paperwork. And that's why it took weeks and weeks and months to get these things processed. And what that meant to you as a client was, you went online, you filled this out, you gave us all kinds of account numbers, you hit submit, it said, congratulations, this is great, you're done. And then 2 weeks later, you'd get this piece of mail that was really cryptic that said, oh yeah, that thing that you did, it didn't really work. By the way, we're not really sure where your 401k is. So it caused all kinds of phone calls. You had to listen to these calls. People were like, where is my money? They were tough. So what we had to do was to go way past the UI. We did use the puppy pictures eventually, but we ended up like way into the mainframe. There was this like one table that only had certain contra firms on it, like super arcane, but it didn't have like Schwab and Fidelity and like places people were moving money from. So we had to add their names to the list in this like crazy table, and then a lot more of them came through, no touch, straight through. So we actually had to get really deep into the process to understand what was happening to our customers, because on the face of it, digitally, it looked fine. So that's another example, too, of like hearing from customers. We were hearing it wasn't working. It looked like it was working. How did we figure that out? We do a lot of work with our market research folks. If you have them in your company, make friends with them. They're hugely useful. As I mentioned, we did a lot of ethnographic research when we put together our taxonomy. We also, as each Journey Lab is in its design phase, they have weekly touch points with small focus groups of 5 to 6 folks kind of from the area that come in and basically give them feedback on what the prototype looks like, on the content, on the messaging that they're putting together. So they're keeping that customer kind of front and center. That's kind of limiting, you know, people are just from the Philly area, so we actually work with, as many of you I'm sure do, usertesting.com to get really quick feedback on a lot of our prototypes, super inexpensive, easy to use. We've also invested in a market research online community, which is a little bit more expensive. You need somebody to moderate it, but it's basically a platform where you can bring in, I think we've got about 5,000 customers in our platform, so you can very easily do surveys. You can segment by different customer types, demographics, or behavioral as you need to. We can set up discussion threads. We can do some co-creation work. So we get some really great feedback kind of in the moment, which works for the Journey Labs because, again, they've got those really fast cycle times. So that has been really helpful. And we also try to keep pictures of our customers kind of in our space. So these are some of the pictures of customers that we've got on the walls. Our PowerPoints actually have Paul and Alpha, and there's a few others, so that we kind of keep that customer close so that we're seeing them all the time. So another, I think, hilarious story, you may not think it's so funny, story that we've got where customer feedback really solved an issue for us is this. We still have a separate brokerage and mutual fund platform. So 2 separate platforms, not a problem for most people. Most people are mutual fund customers. There's about 20% of our clients that are brokerage and mutual fund. We have spent 5 to 6 years, scabillions of dollars, building out this main platform that can handle both. So now we've got to move people to it. And for a couple of years, our marketing folks were sending out lots of emails saying, upgrade your account to our brand new platform. And we weren't getting a lot of adoption. People weren't kind of taking the bait, and we couldn't figure out why. I mean, we tested the heck out of the messaging, and they weren't getting it. So we were trying to really sell them. And really, they saw right through us. As I mentioned, like 80% of our clients don't have a brokerage account, so they're kind of like, wait a minute, you want me to deal with all this paperwork so that I can upgrade to a platform that actually doesn't have some of the things on it that I'm used to, like check writing. So as we started the Journey Lab, our Journey owner did a number of customer interviews and found out really quickly that upgrade was not the word to use. People said, this is clearly not an upgrade. It's actually a pain in the neck. And we have some really good videos, actually. Legal wouldn't let me show you the one video of the guy that was great. He basically called bullshit on the whole thing. So this is not an upgrade. And we kind of took that back, and we realized we had kind of known that, but didn't really want to say it because the whole project had been promoted by the guy who's now the CEO. So anyway, you know, there's some career-limiting moves there. There's things that customers can say that you might not want to say. So get it on tape, because it's really, really helpful. And when we got to more honest messaging, I mean, we basically said, look, we need your help. We got to transition your account. We got this new platform. We got to get rid of the old one. Please, Melinda, help us out. we did much better. We also found that, I mean, because it's brokerage, there's all these arcane questions we have to ask, which for a new account actually kind of makes sense. They're anti-money laundering. But for people who've had money with us for 20 years, it was kind of insulting. So their questions are really nosy. They're like, where do you work? Where'd you get the money? What are you going to do with the money? And people are like, what are you talking about? Like, it's in Vanguard. Like, it's been there for 20 years. Like, why are you asking me this? So we're actually able to quantify the lost opportunities, which really helped us. So we took the business sponsor and some of this feedback, and we went back to legal. We tend to be super conservative, and said, look, like, this is actually going to cost us, and it's going to cost us from a customer experience perspective. We've got to get rid of this platform. And they actually let us take some of the questions off. So in some ways, you can again, let your customers kind of speak for you. So these are just some of the resources. So anyway, those are my 3 areas. And we are, as I mentioned, working with our B2B business lines to do some of this work. So as we work with them, I'll think about where's the sweet spot with sales. So we've got a lot of sales folks who have products they want to sell. We have customers, advisors who really need to put money somewhere. That seems like that toehold, right? To get that customer experience right. We've got lots of sales feedback. So I think that our advisor clients will very clearly tell us, I'm sick of using this fax machine. You have to digitize this stuff. I think we've got the feedback there. And we'll go beyond the digital channel. So a lot of our sales stuff on the B2B side is actually not that digital. So we're kind of dipping into CRM. So we will, so I'll let you know how that works. I'll take my own advice and see how things work.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I really enjoyed that. And judging by the amount of questions,
oh, good.
Everybody else enjoyed it too. We're close to break, but let's go through a couple. There was a lot of questions here, but you're going to be around, right, so people can come
Absolutely.
up and talk to you. Awesome. Okay, so the main question here is, what system do you use to attribute inbound phone calls to web page test variations?
Oh, it's a very special system. We used to call it Excel, but now we do it in Python. We actually just take date and time stamp, and we've got a customer ID, so you have to authenticate on the phone and you have to authenticate on the web. Super convenient. So we use date and time stamp to say, all right, if you were on that particular page and a phone call showed up within half hour, 2 hours, 24 hours, depending on the journey, we will attribute it back. So not super scientific, but it tends to work given the calls that we've listened to.
Second question here is, what does your test velocity look like when you have an organization of that size, and what is your team structure?
Yes, it is not fast enough, I will share with you. We have been trying to get the Journey Labs to thin slice their experiments so they can do more experiments faster so they can get that customer feedback. So we're working on it. I don't really have a number. I think it would look more like a handful a month if I had to guess. So again, not as fast as we want. The team structure, we've got about 250 folks within the client experience group. As I mentioned, we scaled that up pretty quickly. Most of them are in Journey Labs, so that kind of pod of people that I mentioned, with some enablement groups like analytics, program metrics, et cetera.
How do you prioritize customer experience goals with the goals of your execs?
Oh dear, that's where when they kind of overlap, that's what gets prioritized. So I mentioned call rate's a really huge one. We do a lot to try to get call rate down because of the expense associated with it. So it's really kind of what lives in that overlap area.
Okay, we'll do one more. What are the primary KPIs you optimize for or monitor as you run experiments? I lost it now.
Primary KPIs.
What are the primary KPIs?
So yeah, call rate's a really big one. Completion rate, so we call it conversion, it's really completion. Can the customer actually finish what they started to do as defined by the Journey Lab? And then actually most of the Journey Labs also have that straight through processing metric that I mentioned. Does it go right through without manual intervention? Because man, once it hits paper, it's kind of a black hole.
And then there was a second part there. Couldn't some of the primary KPIs be deceptive, for example, reduce call rate?
Primary KPIs you have to ask for. I think I did that one. Oh, couldn't some of the primary KPIs be deceptive? Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, the second line, yes. They absolutely can be deceptive. And again, I mentioned that call attribution is not super scientific. So we do a lot of work to make sure that's real by listening to calls so that we're not misattributing calls. Yeah, you can really get mixed up in those numbers.
Thank you so much
Yeah,
again.
it is. Thank you. Thank you.